Putin was to announce a supposed victory in the war against Ukraine on February 24, 2025, the anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion, according to the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. Russian propagandists will also promote the narrative of Russia's supposed triumph over NATO. The Kremlin has already instructed the intelligence agencies to advance these messages.
One of the key objectives of the new Kremlin propaganda manuals is to cover up Russia's status as an isolated aggressor and war criminal in the civilized world, with the cloak of being the supposedly constructive side of the conflict, ready for a peaceful settlement. From a publication by the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine on Telegram.
All of this is propaganda rhetoric, analysts explain. It has no relations to reality. The Kremlin seeks to destabilize the situation in Ukraine and Europe, as well as discredit Kyiv before its partners.
Russian special services are entering an active stage of information operations against Ukraine and Europe. The main objective is to promote Euroscepticism, support politicians who will question the current EU structure, unbalance Europe to refuse to support Ukraine, and change the current EU course. Andriy Kovalenko, head of the National Security and Defense Council's Center for Countering Disinformation, in a Telegram post.
Putin does not want the war to end. Moreover, it's necessary for him. For the Putin regime, it's a tool to control society and maintain power. The only acceptable scenario for the aggressor country is the complete destruction of Ukraine.
If today the Russian president gives up the aggression, will stop the fighting, I say hypothetically. Of course, it cannot be so, but nevertheless, he has a huge number of problems within Russia, and therefore, of course, it is not in his interest to end the war, certainly not at all.
The quick solutions often mentioned by the Trump administration do not imply a fair end to the war between Russia and Ukraine, experts believe.
The only condition for a quick solution is to have Yalta-type division of the world and dismemberment of Ukraine. Would Ukraine accept it? No. Should the free world accept it? No. Who is now embodying the free world? That's a good question. That's a question that every European country should ask itself.
Russia is not interested in peace negotiations or ending the war against Ukraine. This conclusion was made by the UK Foreign Secretary after listening to Minister of Foreign Affairs Lavrov's speech at closed G20 diplomats meeting in South Africa.
We have not got anywhere near a negotiated settlement. And I have to say, when I listen to what the Russians, I don't see an appetite to really get to that peace. We look forward to speaking to President Trump more about this. We're very, very clear. There must be a role for Ukraine. It must be at the heart of these negotiations. Of course they want peace, but they will need security guarantees.
In the coming days, the leaders of the United Kingdom and France will travel to the United States for talks with President Trump. The main topic of discussion will be security guarantees for Ukraine.
What I'm going to say to him is, you cannot be weak in the face of Vladimir Putin. It's not you, it's not what you're made of, it's not in your interests. How can you be credible in the face of China if you're weak in the face of Putin?
The France and Britain tandem could become a driving force for bold discussions on Europe's defense initiatives and communication with the Trump administration, analysts believe. After the Bundestag elections, Berlin may also join London and Paris in this effort. Reported by Alexandra Zaslavets, Nikita Skoblikov, UATV News. The majority of European countries and Canada will continue to support Ukraine against the backdrop of the changing U.S. policy, the President of France, Emmanuel Macron, said following the informal summit in Paris. The meeting of European leaders on February 19th, the second in a week, was devoted to the security of Ukraine and Europe. The previous one took place on February 17th, the day after the end of the Munich Security Conference.
We stand with Ukraine and will take full responsibility to ensure peace and security in Europe. This is the fundamental interest of France, and I am its guarantor, Emmanuel Macron, President of France, on X social network.
The President of France also noted the main, according to Kyiv's partners, principles of peaceful settlement. First, Ukraine must take an active part in the peace processes, and its rights must be not violated. Second, the peace must be long-lasting and accompanied by reliable security guarantees. guarantees.
The third thing he said is very important, that when discussing a ceasefire or a peace plan, Europe's interests should be taken into account. It seems to me that Europe should make its interest clearer here and further defend this interest in its proposals. Because we see the logic of the United States. This is primarily a business approach. We see the logic of Russia. We see China, which is sitting and waiting. Therefore, Europe should indicate its interest here.
Emmanuel Macron is planning to fly to the United States in the coming days. French Secretary of State for European Affairs Benjamin Haddad has said that Europe has a number of trump cards to play in potential negotiations. The official named as leverage the amount of support for Ukraine, which he claims is more than from the United States, economic pressure on Russia, and the EU's ability to provide Kyiv with reliable security guarantees.
Macron has been showing such initiative for a long time, with a view to preventing certain problems, being bolder in certain initiatives, first of all, in the field of security. France is a nuclear state, as is United Kingdom, so these two countries and their leaders can talk about security and propose bolder solutions.
Prime Minister of United Kingdom Keir Starmer is also preparing to visit Washington. According to The Telegraph, he will call on the President of US, Donald Trump, to keep American fighters and missiles in Europe on standby in case Russia violates the terms of any potential peace. In addition, Starmer is likely to bring to the United States the strategy of deploying European troops in Ukraine.
Sir Keir Starmer will present Donald Trump with a plan to send fewer than 30,000 European troops to Ukraine in an attempt to secure American protection for the deployment. The Prime Minister is expected to detail how European forces could police any ceasefire deal brokered by the U.S. President when the pair meet in Washington next week. From the Telegraph publication,
the President of Lithuania, Gitanas Nausėda, also announced his plan to support Ukraine. In his opinion, Ukraine's membership in NATO cannot be removed from the agenda. The Russian Federation must be held accountable for war crimes, and sanctions must remain in peace until Russia's war against Ukraine ends. Nausėda called for the seizure of frozen assets of the aggressor country, the introduction of tariffs on Russian and Belarusian imports, and the accelerated integration of Ukraine into the European Union. Reported by Alexandra Zaslavets, Valeria Nikipelova, UATV News. A peacekeeping mission in Ukraine is a key element of the British Prime Minister's plan. After concluding a peace agreement with Russia, European states pledged to send their troops to Ukraine to ensure the implementation of the agreements, and the US should be ready to attack if the Russian Federation breaks the agreement, The Telegraph writes. According to the publication sources, Keir Starmer plans to appeal to President Trump with a proposal to keep American fighter jets and missiles in Europe on alert to strike an aggressor if necessary.
The backstop could include U.S. fighter jets stationed in Romania and Poland, ready to respond to any future Russian aggression. A much larger multinational land force could also be based on NATO's eastern borders to move in if necessary to protect European troops inside Ukraine. From the Telegraph publication,
the UK's plan was backed by France. It was discussed by European leaders at a meeting in Paris. However, Washington has not yet announced its intentions to take part in the peacekeeping mission. On the contrary, Donald Trump's administration insists Europe should play a more active role in the issue of providing security guarantees to Ukraine.
I just got off the phone with my counterparts from the UK, France, and Germany and said, look, we welcome Europe stepping in and offering security guarantees. We've been asking for years for Europe to step up and contribute more to not only their own defense, but Ukraine's defense. Michael Waltz, United States National Security Advisor, in an interview with Fox News.
The President of France will also travel to the United States in the coming days, said Minister Delegate for European Affairs Benjamin Haddad.
He will come to speak for the Europeans and say that the future of Ukraine cannot be decided without them. Benjamin Haddad, Minister Delegate for European Affairs from Le Figaro publication.
France and its allies are firmly committed to ensuring strong and lasting peace in Ukraine, Emmanuel Macron said following the meeting of European leaders in Paris.
We stand with Ukraine and will take full responsibility to ensure peace and security in Europe. This is the fundamental interest of France, and I am its guarantor. Emmanuel Macron, President of France, on X social network.
According to the Washington Post, Kyiv's partners are ready to provide several brigades for potential deployment in Ukraine. At the same time, it is not expected that the peacekeepers will be on the contact line. They must be prepared to show force if Russian troops try to resume the war against Ukraine. The mission plans to involve aviation, drones, satellites, as well as maritime patrol ships in the Black Sea. All this should ensure the safety of commercial roads and contribute to the restoration of airspace for civil flights.
Under the Anglo-French plan, fewer than 30,000 European-led troops will be deployed to Ukrainian cities, ports, and other critical infrastructure sites, such as nuclear power stations, far away from the current front lines. Rather than stationing a much bigger force in the war-torn country, the mission will rely on technical monitoring, including intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance aircraft, drones, and satellites to provide a complete picture of what is going on. From the Telegraph publication,
the plans of Kyiv partners to station peacekeepers in Ukraine are categorically rejected in Russia. Putin's spokesman Peskov called them unacceptable. According to him, the participation of military personnel from NATO countries in the mission poses a threat to the security of the Russian Federation. The Kremlin is following the statements of the Prime Minister of the United States, Peskov added. Reported by Alexander Zaslavets, Victoria Smirnova, UATV News. Hamas has handed over 4 dead hostages to Israel through the International Committee of the Red Cross. According to the Times of Israel, there are the bodies of an elderly man, a woman, and their sons. One boy was 9 months old at the time of kidnapping, the other 5 years old. The fathers placed the coffins on stage. Nearby they placed posters reading "Made in the USA" and the caricature of the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. The terrorists claimed the hostages were supposedly killed by an Israeli Defense Forces airstrike. The Ministry of Health of Israel said the bodies will be identified and the cause of death will be determined.
Today is a day of mourn in Israel. It's a very sad day for all of us. We hope that they will come back alive, all of them. They were murdered, they were kidnapped from their homes, and we hope that the rest of the hostages will come back soon, as soon as possible, alive.
As part of a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, the militants are to hand over 6 hostages to Israel on 22nd February. In return, Israel has pledged to release prisoners and detainees from the Gaza Strip. The previous exchange took place on 15th February. Then Hamas handed over 3 hostages and Israel released 369 prisoners and detainees. The situation in the Gaza Strip remains extremely tense, experts say.
Очень высокая вероятность того, что на этой неделе
there is a very high probability that this week, maybe next week, the fighting will resume because the main issue is not resolved: who will retain power in the Gaza Strip. This war will not end with Hamas remaining in power. This is clear to everyone except Hamas itself, which hopes to simply delay. Hamas is counting on the fact that as long as they give up hostages one drop at a time, Israel won't go anywhere.
Israel will begin negotiations with Hamas in the coming days on the second phase of the ceasefire agreement, the chief of the Foreign Ministry of Israel, Gideon Saar, said. He emphasized the Israeli state demands full demilitarization of the Gaza Strip.
We will begin negotiations on second phase of the hostage deal. Israel is committed to our goal to ensure the release of all our hostages. We demand complete demilitarization of Gaza. We will not accept the continued presence of Hamas or any other terrorist groups in Gaza.
Negotiations on the second phase of a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas were supposed to begin on 2nd February 2025, but so far, according to official information, they have not started. The mediators, Egypt, the US, and Qatar, have not reported any progress either. The second stage of the agreement's implementation is particularly challenging, experts explain. After all, we are talking about the management of the Gaza Strip, and on this issue, the positions of the parties are diametrically opposed.
Final settlement talks with Hamas are supposed to begin this week, where Hamas expects not only to remain in power, but also to receive security guarantees in order to prepare for the next round of attacks on Israel. But I don't think that's going to happen. Military action may well resume before Hamas is destroyed.
Israel will not support the transfer of control over Gaza Strip from Hamas to the Palestinian Authority, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs said. The head of the ministry noted he is aware of the alternative Arab plan presented in opposition to Trump's proposal to restore the Gaza Strip under U.S. control. But Israel and the United States have a unified position on the issue. On 16 February 2025, during his visit to Israel, the United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that Hamas must be eliminated and can no longer control the Gaza Strip. Reported by Alexandra Zaslavets, Nikita Skoblikov, UATV News.